We begin in Tunisia, where the country's president has dismissed the government and frozen the parliament. It follows a wave of protests against the government in the country.
First decision, freezing the functions of the parliament. The constitution does not allow its dissolution, but it allows the freezing of its activities. Second decision, the lifting of the parliamentary immunity of all deputies. Third decision, the President of the Republic will take charge of the executive power with the help of the government, which will be headed by a new leader appointed by the President of the Republic.
The North African country is grappling with an economic crisis, a looming fiscal crunch, and criticisms of its response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Thousands of Tunisians had marched in several cities before Parliament was suspended. Hundreds had gathered in front of Parliament in Tunis, criticising government failures and crippling coronavirus rates. Demonstrations turned violent at times on the 64th anniversary of Tunisia's independence. President Kais Saied then announced the suspension of the country's parliament, and tens of thousands of people flooded the streets of Tunis to celebrate. President Kais Saied's supporters gathered in front of the parliament to denounce the Ennahda party. The area was cordoned off by the military to block followers of the party from reaching the building. Police used tear gas to disperse people near an Ennahda party building. The president said he would assume executive authority with the assistance of a new prime minister. He's also suspended the immunity of members of parliament, claiming that his actions are in line with the constitution. Tunisia's Ennahda party slammed the president's move and dismissed it as a state coup against the revolution. Roads here in London were flooded on Sunday as thunderstorms and heavy rains battered the British capital, leaving buses and cars stranded on roads and pedestrians walking ankle-deep across streets in the Forest Gate area of the capital. Police closed one road near Queenstown Road Station in southwest London, where 3 double-decker London buses were stuck under a railway bridge. Mayor of London Sadiq Khan tweeted saying that emergency services were battling significant flooding across the city, adding that public transport services were affected. The mayor also advised people to avoid walking or driving through flooded areas. The United Kingdom's Met Office had issued an amber thunderstorm warning for parts of London and the southeast of England. It warned that there was a risk of lightning strikes and flooding, with up to 10 centimetres of rain forecast to fall in some areas, almost double the monthly average for July. More heavy rain is set to fall as a band of thunderstorms makes its way across the region. Let's go across live now to WION correspondent Laura Makin-Isherwood, who's at St Bart's Hospital in London. And Laura, the flooding's been affecting healthcare services.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the waters have started to submerge now, and you can see, obviously, we're not raining at the moment, but the impacts are still being felt as people are trying to clear up the damage from yesterday's flooding, and St Bart's NHS Hospital Trust has declared a sort of critical emergency in 2 of the hospitals under its operational control. Whipps Cross in the east of the country is currently, in the east of the city, is currently without power in its accident and emergency department. It's had to remove 100 inpatients and put them in other hospitals nearby, and it's also cancelled sort of outpatient appointments as well. Another hospital, Newham, is also still flooded. Its accident and emergency department there still underwater. The staff there saying that people can still head there if they really do need help, but encouraging all members of the public not to go if they can possibly head elsewhere. But it was a busy night, of course, for the rest of the emergency services as well. London Fire Brigade said that they received around 1,000 calls for help. Obviously, you've seen those pictures of people stuck in their cars, stranded on roads that turned into rivers, and of tube stations and rail stations that ended up flooded as well. Some of those are now reopening, but there's still a lot that the city needs to do. And of course, we are expecting more rainfall later.
Well, I was going to say that the clean-up is still going on, but could there be worse still to come?
Absolutely. The Met Office has issued that yellow warning for thunderstorms for the rest of today. So the next sort of 24 hours could be a bit iffy. And the levels of rainfall that are expected could be between 40 to 50 millimetres in some areas. That's about the same amount that was felt yesterday, so more than a month's worth of rainfall in just 24 hours. We could see that again in the coming hours, and it's going to be falling on ground that's already saturated. So where we've seen that flooding over the last 24 hours here, we could see that again, of course, because there is very little space for that water to saturate into the ground. So the police at least are saying for people to be careful, not to take any risks when it comes to driving through flooded roads, because they don't want any more people to be stranded. And with ambulances being asked to divert to different hospitals around London at the moment to avoid those that are currently in a critical situation, it's everyone's responsibility, the emergency services say, to really look after themselves and really stay safe.
OK, Laura, thank you. That's Laura Makin-Isherwood reporting from St Bart's Hospital in London. To China next, and after days of lashing the east of the country with heavy rains, Typhoon In-fa has made landfall. In the coastal region of Zhejiang, over 1.5 million people have been moved to safety. The storms uprooted trees and flooded areas in parts of the east. In the shipping port city of Ningbo, fire trucks couldn't reach people trapped in their own homes, and residents were evacuated using life rafts. Response teams cleared away fallen trees while people waded through flooded streets. The provincial governments issued a red alert for possible mountain torrents in 23 districts and counties. Shanghai has also been battered with heavy rain and strong winds. All inbound and outbound flights were cancelled on Sunday for Shanghai's 2 international airports. The government announced that suspension of railway services will continue, and residents were warned to avoid going outdoors. The typhoon hit as the central province of Henan was still cleaning up after torrential downpours dumped a year's worth of rain in just 3 days last week. The death toll in the flooding has now risen to 63 after 5 more bodies were found. Millions of people have been affected by the floods, with some trapped without food or water for days. It's caused economic losses running into billions of dollars. China is no stranger to flooding in typhoons, but the record rainfall this past week has again raised questions about how cities could be better prepared for such disasters, which are only increasing in frequency due to climate change. And landslides and floods have wreaked havoc in parts of northern and western India as well. In the state of Himachal Pradesh, 9 people were killed after boulders hit their vehicle. The boulders came crashing down on a bridge. Most of the deceased were tourists.
Boulders tumbled down a hill in northern India on Sunday, killing 9 in the destructive path. That's according to local news agency ANI. They reported that a group of mostly tourists was traveling by car when a landslide tore down the Batsiri Bridge in the Kanawar district. TV footage captures its collapse. The Indo-Tibetan Border Police rushed a rescue team to dig through the rubble for any survivors. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi tweeted, quote, "My heartfelt condolences to the families of those who lost their lives in this. All arrangements are being made for the treatment of those injured in the accident." Sunday's bridge collapse comes days after the western state of Maharashtra was devastated by torrential monsoon rains, causing flooding and major landslides. Experts say it was the heaviest rain in July in 4 decades. Nearly 900,000 people were evacuated, and at least 125 died over the weekend.
Next to Afghanistan, and with the Taliban making territorial gains, civilian casualties are on the rise. In its latest report, the United Nations has warned of unprecedented civilian deaths due to the Taliban offensive. The report says that more women and children have been killed and wounded in Afghanistan in the first half of 2021 than in the first 6 months of any year since 2009.
Despite multiple attempts at peace talks, armed conflict between the Afghan forces and the Taliban have only been escalating. The current conflict in Afghanistan is in its 20th year, and bearing the brunt of this war are the innocent Afghan civilians. A latest United Nations report says more women and children have been killed and wounded in Afghanistan in the first half of 2021 than in the first 6 months of any year since 2009. The report added that Afghanistan saw a 47% increase in the number of all civilians killed and wounded in violence across the country in the first 6 months of 2021, compared to the same period last year.
For the first 6 months of 2021, women and children made up nearly half of the total number of civilian casualties, which is obviously a huge concern. They were particularly affected by ground engagements, at times when they were sheltering in their homes. Many of them were impacted by mortars, artillery and also airstrikes, and also they were affected by IEDs.
The report blamed anti-government forces for 64% of civilian casualties, with 39% by Taliban, 9% by Islamic State group, and 16% remain undetermined. The report claims that Afghan security forces were responsible for 23% civilian casualties, pro-government armed groups for 2%.
The most egregious attack taking place on the 8th of May, the school near the school in Kabul, where over 300 civilians became casualties of 3 IEDs, many of whom were schoolgirls who were leaving to go home that day.
Afghan National Security Force spokesman General Omar Shinwari rejected the report on the civilian casualties that blamed Afghan forces for 32% of civilian deaths. He said that security forces have retreated from many areas to prevent civilian deaths. The report found a particularly sharp increase in killings and injuries of civilians since May 2021, when the American and the NATO troops began to withdraw. Taliban offensives since then have only been mounting, with the terror group taking over more than half of Afghanistan's districts. It also claims control of over 90% of Afghanistan's border posts, a claim which the Afghan government has outrightly dismissed. Taliban has insisted that Afghanistan will not witness any peace until there is a new negotiated government in Kabul and President Ashraf Ghani is removed. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
After incendiary balloons launched from Gaza caused fires in Israel, retaliatory airstrikes have been launched. Airstrikes targeted a military base belonging to Hamas in Khan Yunis. This after Israel cut the fishing zone off the Gaza Strip by half. The military branch responsible for civil affairs in the Palestinian territories, Kogat, said the fishing zone had been reduced from 12 nautical miles to 6. The Israeli Defense Forces said Hamas was responsible for all activities within the Gaza Strip and all actions originating in the Gaza Strip directed towards the State of Israel. Its statement goes on, it will therefore bear the consequences for the violence committed against the citizens of the State of Israel. Earlier on Sunday, Israeli firefighters extinguished blazes at 3 spots in the Eshkol region. The incendiary balloons were the cause of the fires. These basic devices are intended to set fire to farmland surrounding the Israeli-blockaded Palestinian enclave. On July the 12th, Israel had announced the re-expansion of the fishing zone off the Gaza Strip, allowing additional imports into the Palestinian territory. But it had also warned the measure could be reversed in response to fresh unrest. In May this year, an 11-day conflict saw Israel launch hundreds of airstrikes on Gaza and Hamas fire thousands of rockets at Israel. Prior to this, the Gaza fishing zone was 15 nautical miles. The 16th Summer Paralympic Games are scheduled to be held in Tokyo from the 24th of August to the 5th of September. Ishrat Akhter, an international wheelchair basketball player from the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir, represented the country at the Asia Oceania Wheelchair Basketball Championship in Thailand, a Tokyo 2020 Paralympics qualifier. She's now training hard to get a gold for India. Our correspondent Johan Castell went to meet her.
Some people are simply unstoppable. They meet adversities head-on, transforming challenges into opportunities. Nice. Ishrat Akhter, who lives in the Baramulla district of Jammu and Kashmir, falls in this category of inspiring humans.
So I'm here with Ishrat Akhter, who has qualified for the India national team for the Paralympics in basketball. How long have you been playing basketball for?
मैं 3 सालों से खेल रही हूँ. मेरा एक्सटेंट हुआ है 2016 में.
And then after you got healed from that, then you took up basketball after that right away?
Yeah. उसके बाद मुझे पता नहीं था मेरे साथ इतना सब कुछ होगा. मतलब फिर मैंने कुछ लड़कों को देखा पहले बास्केटबॉल खेलते हुए. उसके बाद मैंने भी डिसाइड किया कि मैं कुछ करूँगी. तो मैंने उनसे पूछा क्या मैं व्हीलचेयर पे कुछ कर सकती हूँ. उन्होंने बोला तुम हमारे साथ व्हीलचेयर बास्केटबॉल ज्वाइन करो तो तुम भी आगे जा सकती हो. जैसे हमने नेशनल खेला वैसे तुम भी खेल सकती हो. तो उसके बाद मैं एक कैंप में चली गई. वहाँ पे मेरा नेशनल का सिलेक्शन हुआ.
Ishrat has had quite a journey on 2 wheels. She started playing wheelchair basketball in 2018 and has gone on to represent Jammu and Kashmir and India.
Why did you choose basketball instead of another sport?
मैंने कुछ मतलब अचानक से लड़कों को देखा. मुझे पता भी नहीं था मतलब हमारे जैसे लोगों के लिए बास्केटबॉल होता है या कोई और गेम होता है. तो मुझे फिर मतलब जब मैंने पहली बार ये खेला तो मेरे दिमाग में यही बैठा कि मुझे यही खेलना है.
Is there also a team in Kashmir for that? Or?
8 लड़कियां हैं और 10 लड़के हैं.
And you're now a part of India's national team.
Yeah, मैं कश्मीर की पहली लड़की हूँ जिसने इंटरनेशनल खेला है.
After losing her ability to walk on her feet, this brave woman found the will and the way to keep growing in life. Ishrat simply refuses to be shackled by boundaries, be it physical or social. She lives in a village near Srinagar. It's a conservative society, particularly for women. But she refuses to be bogged down. Ishrat says that she could never have imagined earning all the fame and accolades that have come her way in the last few years. But after spending a few hours with her, I'm not surprised that she has managed to achieve so much in such a short span of time. Ishrat continues aiming for the stars.
And do you think that when the next Paralympics comes around that you will win the gold medal? Do you stand a strong chance for the gold?
Yes.
So we'll have to keep our eyes peeled to the televisions when the next competition comes up, and hopefully we'll get a gold for India.
That is all we have time for on today's edition of WION Live Broadcast from London. For more global news and updates, do stay tuned to WION World is One.